Welcome to another episode of No More Mondays, where we believe in the power of loving what you do for work. I am your host, Angie Callan, and today we are diving into a conversation about ownership. And not just in the literal sense of owning a business, but in the way we embody ownership in our roles, no matter where we stand in an organization. And luckily, I have got the person who literally wrote the book on the ownership mindset. Her name is Kerry Siggins, and she is here today to talk about how we can all advocate for a culture of ownership and empowerment in the workplace. She's a small business owner who also lives here in the mountains of Colorado and the owner of Stone Age, where she has guided her organization through pretty incredible growth while adopting and creating this model of employee engagement and success within her own org. She's battled personal challenges to come out on top, and she has even been recognized as a finalist for Colorado's CEO of the Year. So, woot woot for another Colorado female business owner. She's here to share her knowledge on how she's adopted the ownership mindset and how we can all do the same. So, without further ado, Kerry, welcome to No More Mondays.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And I love talking to another Colorado businesswoman leader. It's so inspiring. So
we were literally, side note, we've gotten to chat before. So we already have like a rapport of like, oh, we do all of these things. And we were literally talking about mountain biking. And then it was like, oh, I guess we should go talk about this podcast. So we're going to get into it. And I mentioned the book. It's called The Ownership Mindset, a handbook for transforming your life and leadership. And what I got an advanced copy. So I've got to sneak peek everybody. And it's out there for you now. But it really is this kind of practical guide. And one of the things that struck me and you talk about it is this kind of idea, this distinction between like a paycheck player and that top performer, like through the ownership lens. So I would love for you to share with us a little bit about how you realized this kind of power of the ownership mindset and how it transformed your approach to leadership.
Absolutely. So I would say I was absolutely a paycheck player all through my 20s. Not that most of us in our 20s aren't. We're figuring out this whole work thing, leadership, life, how it all comes together. But I really just cared about my own success. And I'm very driven, very ambitious, and was climbing the corporate ladder. But it was really, quite frankly, about me. And so I was very focused on how much money I was making, not on am I being a great teammate, and am I really bringing value to the company, and how do I take real ownership of how I show up in this culture? And I developed substance abuse issues in my 20s. And so kind of this combination of like being really focused on myself and having self-esteem issues. And, this isn't a therapy session, so I won't go into all the reasons why I developed substance abuse issues.
It's okay. People out there are going, oh, okay, it's not just me. So,
no. I mean,
vulnerability is a good thing. Adds context.
We all have coping mechanisms. Mine was substances. And so it all kind of came crashing down. And so quite frankly, I was just miserable. It's miserable when you don't have meaning and purpose in your work. And really being unhappy at work was part of my spiral, because I am so ambitious and driven. And it was really painful for me to not feel like I was moving the needle and not feel like that I was really kind of making things happen the way that I wanted to make them happen. And so then when I came back to Colorado, I was living in Texas, and I came back to Colorado to get my life together. I had to move back in with my mom. I was 28 years old. I got my job at Stone Age, and I should never have gotten it. I was completely underqualified, but I bet on myself and applied for a general manager position at this tiny little manufacturing company, Stone Age. We were about $8 million in revenue at the time, and the founder saw something in me and gave me a chance. And Stone Age was an employee-owned company then. It wasn't an ESOP, but one of the things that they really did was teach people how to think like owners. And not intentionally, not like the program like what we have now, but they gave me a lot of leeway to learn, and they would ask my opinion, and they would let me try things even though they didn't necessarily agree with what I was doing. And all of a sudden I realized that I had autonomy and trust to to grow. And I stopped thinking about my paycheck. And I worked so hard, but it was because I was making a difference in my company. I was figuring out how to be a leader. I was figuring out how to run a company. And there was this significant switch when all of a sudden I realized I haven't thought about my paycheck in months. All I've thought about is how I am helping grow this company. And it was such this fulfilling feeling. And so I wouldn't have been able to do it without John and Jerry investing in me, trusting me, making me stretch and grow. I think I would have probably always been focused on a paycheck if I wouldn't have had mentors and leaders who developed this type of thinking within me.
I love that. I always find it really interesting that in our professional journeys, we kind of end up where we're supposed to be, whether or not we intentionally planned it. And sometimes you can't intentionally plan it. And here you were getting exactly what you needed without even knowing what you needed. And I want to pause real quick because this was actually a question I wanted you to explain to everybody, but we've mentioned ESOP. I think it would be good to just explain, to let everybody in on the acronym and just kind of what it means as a foundational thing to kind of this big picture.
Yeah, absolutely. So ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan, and it's a formal structure, employee-owned structure that companies can put into place to transfer ownership from founders or business owners to the employees. So basically, at a real high level, it's complicated. It's a complicated process to build to create an ESOP, but ultimately, what you do is you create a trust, an ESOP trust, and the ESOP buys shares from the exiting shareholders, and then it's distributed to employees on an annual basis. And it's ultimately a retirement benefit. That's how you maximize it. It's managed by oversight. Has oversight by ERISA and by the Department of Labor. And that's how you maximize it. We don't talk about it as a retirement benefit here. We talk about it as an ownership model because that's really what it is. Mm-hmm. And it's maximized by looking at as a retirement benefit, but it's truly how employees can own the company in a broad sense. So that's what an ESOP is.
Yeah. So if you hear, so that's let's say the entity structure, the formal structure of something you might hear is like, oh, that's an employee owned company. Yeah. I'm trying to think of one that pops into my mind. New Belgium Brewery was an employee-owned company until Coors purchased it, is an example. Yeah. For some reason, beer came to mind first for some reason.
Yeah, well, it's one of the biggest ones, and it was here in Colorado.
Exactly.
And very successful, 30-year ESOP. And in fact, when they sold, I don't think it was to Coors, it was to a different big company.
It was Anheuser-Busch, thank you.
Anheuser-Busch, yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, so when they sold, a lot of people said, "Oh, this is so sad. This ESOP failed," but it didn't. Like every business model runs its course, and there are going to be things that happen that are going, that leaders are going to have to look at and say, what's the best thing for the company and what's the best thing for the employees. But New Belgium created hundreds, if not 1,000 millionaires, which is what our goal here at Stone Age is to create 1,000 millionaires. And so while, they had to make a business decision so that New Belgium could continue, it was not a failure. It created a tremendous amount of wealth for a lot of employees. And so
it was a succession plan.
That's what ESOPs are here.
It was exactly. And that's a situation in anything. Like all of us are in business for a liquidity event, you guys. Like, yeah, we're going to make impact in the long run, but a liquidity event like that is a total success. And a succession plan, absolutely not a failure. And you brought up something about kind of those leadership decisions that I think takes us perfectly to kind of where I wanted to go next, which is kind of this practical side. A lot of leaders struggle not only with those big decisions, but empowering teams to think like owners. There are not a lot of Stone Age minded people out there, to be honest, let alone in the industry that you're in building materials. I think that's fascinating as somebody that used to work in AEC. But in your experience transitioning Stone Age to a really formal conscious model around this kind of ownership mindset, what was the key? What worked? How have you made the shift?
Well, I think you have to have a bigger vision in mind. And so, we did. We had this vision of wanting to share with the success of the company with our employees. And so it starts with a vision. And then it really kind of ends with humility. You have to be able to put your ego aside and help encourage people to think on their own, to think critically, to come up with ideas, to take risks, to try new things, to really own it. And a lot of leaders can't put that aside, and that's usually driven from fear, whether it's fear that, oh, if I give over control, we're going to fail. Maybe fear of, if somebody can make these decisions without me, am I really needed? Right. I think most of those command and control things come from that fear, but you really have to approach it with humility and this idea that we are all in this together, and that we're going to build this strong company when the company is filled with people who know how to think critically, who aren't afraid to take risks, who aren't afraid to make decisions, and who really feel like they are vested in the success of the company. So for me, I have to put my ego aside all the time. I have people walk in my office and tell me exactly what they think, which is fantastic. But a lot of leaders cannot handle that. They're like, what? You're questioning my decision here? An employee-owned company, then employees get to do that. It doesn't mean that they get to make all the decisions, although we try to push decision-making down to individual contributors as often as we can. Ultimately, I'm still responsible for the company, but I want people to question what we're doing. I want people to feel like they own it and that they have a say in what we're doing and how they do their work. So it takes a lot of humility, I think, to build an own it culture.
And I think it's just an interesting dynamic, because this is truly where you move into leadership instead of management, which is a very common, interchangeably used set of words that aren't actually interchangeable. And I think we tend to see management in corporate America as leadership, but this is truly leading. But man, is it a personal growth challenge for you as the leader to sit there and go, ooh, okay, wait, I created this environment. This person's supposed to be in here giving me this feedback. I have to figure out kind of how to take it in stride. And I want to pause really quick and just talk to everybody out there, because this is obviously very relevant if you are in an ownership position with a staff and with employees, in how it can apply to you. I think it's also similarly obvious, and we're going to talk more about how you can adopt this even as an individual contributor, and how you can weave that potentially within your own, a little bubble within a company. But I know a lot of you out there might be solopreneurs. And I think that this is a really important lesson to learn before you become a business owner. Because even as a solopreneur, you are a business owner, but there's a difference between a solopreneurial endeavor and building a business, because that's when you do need to bring people into the team, and you have to start delegating. And delegating is the scariest thing for a solopreneur to do, because and I'm going to put we in this bucket because I was one, don't like to give up stuff. And if we do, we're going to micromanage the hell out of it. And so this is a really great thing to wrap your head around before you ever have somebody to share an ownership mindset with.
Yep. Agree completely.
So I just wanted to kind of lay that out to get you all thinking, because now I want like a little bit of an imagined scenario here. What does this look like day to day, right? In your environment, how does this look different than something that's more like autocratic and hierarchical? How does this employee owned culture look in your environment from a day to day?
Yeah, I think it looks like you have happy employees. In fact, our customers come, and this is the best compliment I hear. A customer comes and visits, and we give them a tour, and people want to engage in the tour. Our employees want to tell our customers, this is what I do. And over and over and over again, I have people say, I've never seen people so proud of the work that they do. They're so proud to share how they help make us safer, or make us more efficient, or get our work done. And so I think there's this deep sense of pride. And I think that's what you would walk in here and see. You are going to see people with smiles on their face who are really proud of the work that they do, who can talk very articulately about what the company does, what our vision is, where we're going, and what their role is in making that happen. So there's deep engagement. I mean, it's just a vibe. It's just this really good, engaged, happy vibe around here. We work really hard. People care deeply. And I think that it emulates throughout the whole company, whether you're here at headquarters or any of our branch offices around the world.
And everybody out there who's ever job searched is going, how do I apply to Stone Age? And I guess I'm moving to Durango, Colorado, maybe. But these are the kinds of places people say, oh, I wish I could work in this type of environment, because not everybody's going to go be a business owner. Some of us are meant to be part of the overall picture.
Exactly.
But this is, you guys, Kerry's proof that these places exist. Right now, you really got to go searching for them. But let's hope that this whole movement is going to take on and we're going to see more of them, which brings me to a really specific question that I kind of maybe touched on a minute ago. If you're an employee and you work in an environment that is not like this, what can you do to either advocate for it or create this for yourself in your own little space?
Sure. So the first place I would always start was with number one, within yourself. And owning it means you can always do a great job. You can always speak up. Right? There's a way to be able to express your opinion without it being so scary. And I talk a little bit about that in the book, but there's an easy way to be able to approach, hey, I've got this idea. What do you think, without making it be a negative thing if you have a boss who isn't necessarily open to that. So speaking your mind, sharing your ideas, owning your work effort, and role modeling, owning it. Always taking responsibility if you screw up, saying, hey, like maybe we should have done this a little bit differently. I think that you have to be able to role model it if you're going to have other people within your team. If it's not a company culture, but you think that your boss is open to it, I would have that conversation. Like, how do we create more autonomy in this team so that we have more decision-making authority, so that we really feel like we have ownership in this? Partner with your boss if you feel like that person is open to it. But not every culture is like that. That's for sure. But I don't think that and this is what I didn't realize when I didn't have this type of culture and I spiraled down, is that I thought it was all them. And I didn't do any of these things. I didn't feel like I was responsible for my own happiness at work. I said my boss was responsible for that. I said no one is ever going to listen to me, so I didn't say anything. I told myself this culture isn't a good fit, so why should I engage in it? I said, my teammates aren't pulling their own weight, so why should I? That is not ownership thinking. And I would have had such a much better experience if I would have owned it and said, I'm still going to give that kind of effort because that's what I should do. I don't care if my teammates don't pull their own weight. I'm going to, so that I role model it. And I'm going to have this conversation with my boss and I'm going to see where it goes, because that's how you impact change. Instead, I let myself spiral down and make all these excuses rather than just having that conversation. Interestingly enough, when I finally, after I overdosed, accidentally overdosed on Labor Day of 2006. And then I had to go and talk to my boss about leaving and where I was at. All of those stories that I told myself about him and the company were not true. When I started finally being honest with him, he helped me. And I would not have been able to leave and in a healthy way if he wouldn't have. And so it was all a story that I had in my head. And I wish I would have handled it differently before it got to that point.
And that's all. Those are the learning experiences now that
Exactly.
that wasn't a failure. It was an experience you needed to have
totally.
to inform everything
so
else. And that's just a big lesson in general. I think we fear failure too much. And that's why then we don't go have what we make up in our head to be really difficult discussions.
Exactly.
They might be they're definitely not easy conversations to walk into your boss and say, hey, this environment could be better. That is employee owned, and you're supposed to walk in and say that. It still isn't easy, but no. I think we create the scenarios in our head that it's going to be a huge issue. We'll fail at it, so we don't do it. But when you advocate for yourself, really big things can come. And I think you and I could have be on an amazing soapbox together about that whole quiet quitting thing that happened a few years ago, right? Because that's blame game. That's making it about everyone else. And work is a relationship. And what are relationships? 50-50. Yep. Now, there is a time to leave a relationship. So we're not saying stay forever, but you can make something work longer than you think you can. If you change your thinking, establish that purpose for yourself, even if the business, the leadership, or the team doesn't provide it. Yep. And it becomes a little bit more of a rewarding, or at least a sustainable experience until you can make a move.
Yep, I agree. My next book, I'm working on it right now. I'm building out what I'm calling the share model of feedback, and it's literally to just be able to prepare yourself to have these conversations that lead to a really positive outcome. And it's the model that we use here at Stone Age that I've created to be able to have incredibly difficult conversations and actually get better at it. I'm a people pleaser. I want people to like me, which makes it really hard to have difficult conversations because I'm afraid that they're not going to like me if I tell them what I really think. And so I created this model that is the share model, and it has this idea around share because that's what this is about. It's not about giving feedback. It's not about, telling it like it is. It's about sharing. And so so that's going to be my next book is helping to hopefully get what I've learned out there about being able to advocate for yourself, to have these difficult conversations and do it in a way that makes it less scary and produces more of a positive outcome. Like you can't control what other people are going, you can show up their very best, but you can't control how other people are going to react. And you don't have to own that reaction as long as you've done everything you can to prepare to have a positive, constructive, but difficult conversations. So that's what book number 2 is about, because I'm so passionate about having these types of conversations. It's really important.
I love that you gave us A, the teaser, and B, there was a small little aha moment in there that I'm going to start changing a phrase when I help people go into these types of conversations. Share is distinctly a different mindset.
Exactly.
Or approach, because it changes the expectation of the outcome. Yeah. And I think reduces the pressure of I'm either going to win or lose, right? I'm going to share something and it's going to be received and something will come of it. And it might be a compromise. It might be something in the middle. But I think that particular term is a very strategic selection of verbiage and very appropriate to this kind of ownership mindset in an even bigger sense.
Totally agree. And, another piece of advice that I give people when they're going in to share, I encourage them to use the word, I would like to share my experience. Because when you say, I want to tell you what I think, people can argue with, well, that's not the right way to think. When people say, well, this is how I'm feeling, people can say, well, you shouldn't feel that way. But when you say, I'd like to share my experience, it's really hard to argue with someone's experience, right? This is how I just experienced this situation, or this is how I'm experiencing this culture. And it opens up this dialogue rather than I'm going to tell you, or I might be emotional and share how I feel. Both of those are very legitimate things, right? Being cerebral and wanting to just lay out the facts, or being honest about how you're feeling. That's all valid, but it's always not received well, and people can shut it down. It's hard to shut down experiences. So I want to share my experience, and I use this in the share model, is a really powerful way to be able to express yourself in a way that people will hear you and not necessarily get defensive or try to tell you that you shouldn't think or feel that way.
Yeah, the get defensive is really what we're trying to create an opening line that's going to create conversation, not make a non-starter. Which brings me to kind of our third little piece of conversation here, and we've so beautifully arrived at it. And I appreciate that you've shared some personal pieces of how the professional and the personal came together, really kind of help realize a lot of these things. And I'm curious now how the awareness around mindset, sharing experiences, and all these little things you've shared with us has impacted your personal life.
Oh, tremendously. I mean, let's face it, mindset is everything. And the ownership mindset is quite honestly the most powerful thing that you can have to make your life better, to change your life. When you own everything that happens in your life, never be a victim. Like, I am never going to be a victim. Even if something happens that is completely out of my control, I still am responsible for how I react to that, how I show up in it, how I learn from it. It's transformative. And so it has 100% transformed my life. I'll share a story that I think really emulates how powerful it can be. So in 2018, my VP of operations, who I wanted to be my COO, he and I were butting heads. He really wanted to me to tell him that he could be the next CEO, which was crazy because like, I'm not going anywhere. But you know, he was looking for me to validate that he had the talent, the skills, the ability to be a CEO. But I did not believe that he did in this company. Somewhere else, absolutely. But he couldn't ever be my successor. Just very too far different from where we needed to go as a company. And so I told him that, and he got really, really angry with me. And he said to me, Kerry, you think you're this disruptive CEO and you're inspiring with your story. Really what you are is you're just erratic. You drive and you drive and you drive, and no one knows where you're going. And it stung so bad. And in the moment, I had to like really keep myself cool, calm, and collected because I wanted to be like, get the F out of my office and, you know, fire him.
Yeah, you want to react.
I want to react, but
it's a charge. It's definitely a charged statement on his part, and that you could easily react to. But there's also truth to it, I'm guessing.
Exactly. And so, you know, I just took a deep breath at the moment, and I said, "Wow, that is tough. I'm going to have to process that." And so, I think we need to end this meeting now and let's come back tomorrow. And I made it to my car and I started crying, and I went home and I had all these these doubts like, oh my God, if people think that I'm erratic, like why I can't be a CEO, I'm not good at this job. And my husband told me, look, you know, first of all, he had some choice words for this gentleman. He's like,
let's get this out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and he's like, look, you know, you are like, your drive is exhausting and you're like 15 steps ahead of everybody. So sometimes people don't know where you're going, but you are such an inspiring leader, and that's what makes people want to work for you. So take the good from the feedback and let the rest go. So I decided to focus on the word erratic because if I was honest with myself, I do move really fast. I do have a fear of missing out. So I go after a lot of different opportunities instead of just stay focused. And I did have this vision, but I hadn't articulated it in a way that everybody could see how the decisions I was making were going to lead us to that vision. So that next morning, I vowed never to be called erratic again, that from that point on, I was going to be cool, calm, and collected, and that I was going to create this very clear vision for a company that everybody in the company could understand. And this dramatically improved my leadership style. Being cool, calm, and collected, unflappable, just not getting upset about anything. It made me so much more approachable. It made me more rational, made me be able to stay neutral in situations, which you make so much better decisions when you are neutral rather than emotionally charged. And I went out and I wrote a document, what the future looks like. That's the name of the document. We use it still today with this clear path of where we were going, and we use it to guide our strategy. And it was the best piece of feedback I've ever been given. And that is what the ownership mindset is. It's being able to hear something that's hard, take the good from it. I let the rest go. Like, you know, I was going to go down the path of I'm not a good CEO. I shouldn't be doing this.
The imposter was coming in full force there, right? In that moment.
But I could work myself through that and say, nope, I'm not going to let that negative self-talk deter me from my path, my purpose. But I am going to take this feedback and I'm going to modify myself so that I'm a better leader. And it has transformed my leadership style, which has helped me grow this company exponentially, help us go through a significant pivot in business model. And so I'm so grateful for that feedback. It changed my life. And that is the power of the ownership mindset right there. You can do so much good with it. It's not easy. Sometimes it made me want to throw up when I got home and was like dealing with like this really, really tough piece of feedback that shook me to the core. But when you stick with it and you do the work and you own it, you can transform your life. So that's an example of how this mindset has really served me.
I love that. I literally wrote this in my notes. Unflappable is a great word. And I think that the more this stuff is challenging, but the more you go through it, the thicker skin you get, exactly. And the more unflappable you become. And the fewer and further between the episodes of imposter syndrome get, because you just keep conditioning yourself more and more and more towards them. And I love this idea. The ownership mindset is, I didn't even think of this until now, is such a I love the term for what we're talking about and for the book, because there's so many different meanings. It has like a quadruple entendre here of like, it's the ownership mindset in the work, ownership mindset in leadership, ownership mindset of life and the direction, because we can't control everything in life. And I really appreciate the kind of that what you brought up, victim mentality, because I think a lot of people do take that on where it's like, oh, why is this happening to me? Instead of either saying, how's this happening for me? How can I turn this into something constructive? Or just knowing that we can't control everything, we're not gonna. And as soon as you can loosen that grip, your whole life becomes a whole lot easier because you can only control how you react and the way you act from there. And I think once you take ownership of all that, you do become a lot more unflappable. So how's that for pulling everything together? Love it.
Beautifully done.
Yay. That's why I host a podcast, I suppose. So let's do some takeaways before we have to wrap things up. Because there's little tidbits of fantastic advice in here, but I have kind of 3 specific things I want to ask for our 3 takeaways. So you can apply this to life, to work, to both. So let's start with leaders. What's your number one piece of advice on how leaders and owners can foster this culture in their organizations?
Build trust. All of this starts with trust. If you don't trust your employees, then you're not going to give them freedom to make decisions. You're not going to give them autonomy. You're not going to delegate work, and you cannot create ownership thinking if you do not have that trust. And people aren't going to take that level of responsibility on if they don't trust you as a leader. Trust that you're not going to freak out if they make a mistake, that you are going to throw them under the bus, that you are going to undermine a decision that they make. So the number one thing is trust.
That's a mic drop moment. If you don't trust someone, don't hire them. Right? 100%. Or if you don't trust, don't hire. Trust is the foundation of all relationships, personal and professional. So number 2, let's flip the script. Let's say you are the paycheck player. You are quote unquote just a worker bee by your own definition. How can you begin adopting this mindset in your own little worker bee world?
Never say the word but. I think but is your key to knowing that you're being a victim. I could have done that better, but I could have showed up differently, but I would have done that on time, but. Catch yourself saying buts. That is when you know that you're falling in victim mode. And when you are being the victim, you give away your power to change your situation. So pay attention to the buts.
It's just like when you say, I'm sorry, but you have just negated the apology. It's like, I'm sorry, but there's 12 caveats coming, right? Same.
Or all due respect, but.
Yes, exactly. Let's remove the word but from our vocabulary. Really great. That's a really just great practical thing to start putting a quarter in a jar every time you say but in that kind of connotation. You'll be rich by the end of the week. So speaking of being rich by the end of the week, number 3, how do we apply this in our personal lives?
So I think it goes to the same thing. It's really about adopting this mindset of I am responsible for every single thing that happens to me. And write that down, journal it, whatever your personal practices are. I am responsible for everything. I am responsible for everything that happens to me. It is empowering. And it might not feel that way at first. I mean, people have gone through all kinds of horrible trauma that they did not bring on themselves. And it is a tough road to be able to let that go, to say, but I'm still responsible for my life now and what the outcome is. And so I think it's really developing that mantra and living that, embodying that mantra of I am responsible for everything that happens in my life. I'm responsible for the outcome of my life. And if you really feel that and embody it, then you can change your life.
There you have it, everybody. The ownership mindset. Build trust if you're in a position to lead people. Remove the word but from your vocabulary, because then the victim mentality goes with it. And all of this will roll up to a life that is a whole lot more purposeful and more empowered, because you are taking accountability, responsibility, and control of everything. And that is ultimately what the ownership mindset is all about. It applies to everyone at all levels, in all areas of an organization and in life. And Kerry and I promise that if you embrace this, it will make everything easier and more successful.
Yes, it will.
And now I would like to share my experience, I'm going to have to use that in a phrase today, everybody.
Yes.
That's another. Okay, so that's your bonus number 4 takeaway. Put that in your lexicon and use it the next time you have to approach a hard conversation at home or at work. So Kerry's got all kinds of good stuff out there for you and coming, it sounds like. So give yourself a shout out, Kerry, and tell everybody where they can find you, follow you, get the current book, get the new book, and get all this wisdom.
Yeah. So everything you find out, everything about me on my website, kerrysiggins.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. That's the social media platform that I use the most, at Kerry Siggins. I am on Instagram, and there's lots of fun stuff on there. But all my business focused stuff is on Instagram, or on LinkedIn. The book you can get on my website, or go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or go to your local bookstore and have them order it for you so we can support local. And then my new book, I'm working on it now. So I'm guessing 2025, maybe 2026. We'll see. I do have a company to run, and 11-year-old son, and so I write the book in my free time, which there's not a lot of.
Yeah, you've got some other things to do. That's okay. You could be you could be a guest again then, and probably in between. Who knows? This is not the last you've seen of the Kerry and Angie show. I can guarantee you that.
I
Kerry
can't
Siggins,
wait for another
everybody.
round.
This has been an absolute pleasure to have you on No More Mondays today. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, the personal tidbits that I think are key to really understanding you and how your perspective on this has shifted, and reminding us that ownership is more than a title. And to all of you out there, I hope you're inspired to take a look at your role in an organization and your perspective on life a little differently. And I hope you share this experience with someone today as well. As always, if you want to follow Kerry or grab the show notes from today's episode, visit us at nomoremondays.info. And also, while you're picking up your podcast, give us a 5-star rating, because Kerry and I are awesome and because it makes me smile. And until next week, this is No More Mondays, signing off.